Today we're going to talk about a few pattern markings, which is important to know for when you're using commercial patterns. These are some vintage pattern pieces, so they may look a little bit different than what we're used to in the modern world, but other than that, the markings on patterns are pretty much universal. So a couple of the main ones that I want to point out, which I really like these older patterns because they make the place on fold marking very obvious. A place on fold mark will always look like two arrows that are pointing towards the edge, and then it will usually say place on fold, but you can look for this shape and know that you're supposed to pin that on the fold. This particular pattern has the seam lines marked. One of the reasons why they did that on this particular pattern is because there are actually differing seam allowances depending on where you're sewing. So for example, this has a 3/4 inch hem allowed, but this is a 5/8 seam allowance. This is obviously on the fold, so there's no seam allowance, but anyway, it differs depending on the lengths. Now you'll have some notch marks, which always look like a diamond, and they're typically on the seam line. And when you're cutting out a pattern that has these notch marks, you will actually cut out a little triangle of your fabric. So you'll follow this line and you'll have some little notches that come out of your fabric. Or that jut out from your seam line, or the seam allowance line, I should say. So that's kind of how you cut those. If you have a double like this close, something typical is to cut out straight and then down rather than doing two little triangles, just to make that a little bit simpler. Another line, or not line, another marking you should see, or you could see on a pattern, are dots. And those dots are important to mark because those will show you where to match up, for example, the collar to the neckline. And if you don't mark those and you kind of just eyeball it, it's never going to be as accurate as it could be. Another line you should see on, or another marking you should see on your pattern pieces, and these two actually do not include a grain line, place on straight of grain, because they are a place on the fold. So it's kind of an automatic given that those are placed on the fold. You shouldn't obviously have your fabric folded like at a diagonal, so it's kind of assumed that these will be placed on the grain. This, which is not placed on the fold, has a large grain line marked right here. When you understand the properties, especially of woven fabrics, but it also applies to knits, when you understand the properties of fabric, you come to understand how important it is to place things on the straight of grain. So this line that is marked should always be parallel to the selvage that you have on your fabric. So the selvage is kind of the finished edge. Sometimes it has like some fuzzies on it, sometimes it has like some holes punched through it, but either way, the straight of grain line should be parallel or running the same direction as the selvage. Another marking line that or pattern symbol that you might find is a fold line. On this particular pattern, this is a pair of child's pants. So the fold line happens to be at the bottom for the hem or cuff, and this particular pair of pants has a cuff. So that would be like a fold up, but it also has a hem. So the fold lines are marked here. Another pattern symbol that you may come across is a buttonhole symbol, which is a line with two perpendicular shorter lines at the end of it, and that marks a buttonhole. If you are working with a shirt, for example, you would have the buttonholes would typically run vertically down the shirt, the front shirt opening. On this particular collar, it's actually at a diagonal, you can see right here. But either way, that's the mark for a buttonhole. There are many more marks that you might find on a pattern piece. It kind of just depends on what you're sewing and what the needs of that particular pattern are. But this is a little basic introduction into some of the things that you might find on a pattern piece. And they're important really for the accuracy of construction. So it might seem kind of like, yeah, well, you match the top and that's all you need, so I don't really need to mark the notches or whatever, but marking the notches will always lead to a better final project than just kind of winging it. So those are a few of the basic pattern markings. Again, that's not an exhaustive list. There are a lot more, but that's kind of the main thing that you need to know. One thing that I do want to mention as well is that every pattern piece should be labeled with either a number or a letter. These happen to be letters, and then it will typically have the brand and then the pattern piece name. So this is a shirt back, this is a collar, this is a pants back, and then there should be something that tells you how many to cut, because sometimes you cut 4 of something, sometimes you cut 1 of something. With the collar, you actually cut some of the interfacing as well, so that's marked here, and that will all help you understand how many pieces you need to cut and how they all fit together.